Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Friday, July 4th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's choosing to join us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives. We spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to those, even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@yagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment or a testimonial from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. If you have the capacity to join us live or meeting through a Zoom meeting or through the phone, and the Zoom meeting ID number is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. And we greatly appreciate it whenever anybody shares with us, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service. And that's just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So please feel free to send us an email or get on the call or open up a browser window and type in zoom.us and then enter our meeting ID and either speak up voice to voice or type something in the chat room. So how can we support you today? What's happening on this American holiday? We had our support group last night, and we didn't listen to anybody other than questions and comments from the group. And I was thinking this morning about Dr. Michael Rice's book. Even though his book is no longer in print, his book, the title of which is Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's still available used. If you don't find it used for like $3 to $5 or $6 or $8, then wait a little bit and then try again, because I believe what happens with the algorithm is after somebody buys a few of these at $5 or $6 or $8 or $9, the algorithm lets the sellers know that there's more interest in the book, and so they boost the price. And so the next time you search for it, it might be $15 or $25. But if you wait a while and people haven't bought them, they'll go down to $5 or $6. And not that it isn't worth $20 or $25, but most of the people who are going for a book that's out of print like this are going for it for the content, not because they want to buy a collectible. And it's fascinating when I buy these used books and I see where people have marked it up with their highlighters and markers, and it ends up fascinating me because most of them are not highlighted and markered up all the way through. They usually go about the first third or sometimes the first half of the book. And it's almost as though the person quit reading because there aren't any more notations. But I've noticed that on more than one occasion when I've gotten those used books from used copies of Michael's book. And the other thing I thought I would, if no one has any question or comment, I would read a little bit from the opening of the new Guy Finley book, which is a pre-release edition. You can't even buy this thing yet. I don't know when it's actually going on sale, but the title of the book is One Love, One Life, One Journey by Guy Finley with Dr. Ellen Dickstein. And yes?
Oh, I shouldn't have interrupted. I just wanted to petition that we rename the book. Why am I doing this to me again?
You wouldn't be the first to suggest that title.
Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted for that.
That's okay. It's one of Michael's frequent jokes when he talks about his history with the book and having a phone line at Heartland where people would call up and ask if he's the one who wrote that book. Why are they doing this to me again, etc.
Yeah, I've heard him say that, but I've never heard, why am I doing this to myself again?
That's good. This is Susan B. here joining in. I also had a question. Dr. Tim, I was wondering if in preparation for the Christian Sundberg show you're doing, would it be okay if we submitted questions to you to have on hand?
That'd be fine.
Okay. Because I've been making them, thinking about it. What would I like to
a list of questions for him to answer for you?
Yeah.
As though he has some divine input that you don't have access to?
No, I didn't mean that at all. What I would love to find out from him is first of all, he wrote the book a while back. Would he like to add anything to it, or has he changed his mind about anything? And then also, I'd love to ask him about his present mundane, day-to-day human life and how the knowledge he has about his pre-human life affects his human life, if at all, and how he deals with upsets and things. Does he always keep a perspective? Maybe he has answered some of these in the book, but I'd love to just get to know him as a human on the planet, dealing with the same stuff we deal with.
Well, I think you'll get some of that. I think it's inevitable when people read an author, whether it's a science fiction, a fantasy, or a nonfiction or whatever, they want to learn more and more about the author as a personality.
Mm.
So I'm certain he's used to questions like that. In the brief conversation I had with him to line up the interview, he let me know that he's a 45 years old now. It's been about 15 years since he had this realization, and he's a project manager and the father of young kids, and so he has a very normal life.
Mm,
And with the possible exception of his that he might have significantly better boundaries than a lot of people in his position. And by that, I mean, when I asked about a potential time to do an interview, he said, well, I only allow myself to do one of these per week. So the next time I have an opening is in August.
mm,
And this was quite a few months ago. So I
Mhm.
applauded him for the wisdom displayed in that limit setting, right? In that what some people would call having good boundaries and having his priorities actually be something he considers when he's planning out his life. It's not just lip service.
mm. Do you know if he's still writing, going to write another book?
I do not know that. That would be a good question to ask.
Mm. Okay, well, I'll write down my questions and send them to you in an email or something.
That would be lovely. You know how to reach me.
Yeah. You know, it's funny how a teacher can function. I mean, here you are on the radio show misspeaking, and we all made a big joke about how instead of unfettered, you said unfeathered. And that reminded me of my little bird. And then you said he didn't know he was ugly. He didn't know he was ugly. That has become, this bird has, I don't know what totem animal is, but if in my own understanding of the word totem animal, I realize that he is my totem animal. I feel as if I'm him and I adore him. So I'm finding my way back to who I think I am through this skinny, teeny, featherless little bird. I just had to thank you because he has given me such joy in the last couple of days. With all that's going on, I feel as if I have become him enough to not let other things change take away that joy, I guess I should say. So thanks a lot. You didn't mean to do it, but you did.
I revel in all of the delightful coincidences and little synchronicities that happen through all of our shows and our statements and our misstatements, as you call them. And you might remember back, I think you were around here when we had chuckles and laughter
Oh yeah, I do
on the
remember.
radio
Yeah, I do.
with Michelle and
Right.
playing, the straight person or the sidekick. And so laughter is good medicine.
Mm,
And, Michael Rice likes to talk about this. You know why angels can fly? Because they don't take themselves they take
serious.
themselves so lightly, right? They don't take
Lightly.
themselves
Yeah.
serious. And that's just really good advice for us
Mm,
as we live out our lives on this little blue marble spinning through space, through one very ordinary galaxy out of billions of galaxies. It's really good advice not to take ourselves too seriously.
yep.
In every way and every day. Well, any other thoughts for you or updates or support we
Well,
can offer?
update on the exorcism idea. Just as I was getting off the show yesterday, I think it was on the Michael Rice Hour. In any case, my husband was calling my daughter, asking her how she felt about us doing an exorcism for her boy, Jake. And she loved the idea. She was very open to it. And so the following morning, I got busy going on the internet, finding materials about exorcisms and whether and if and how you do one from a distance without even having the quote unquote possessed person aware of our doing it. And I found a wonderful, it's totally Christian based, but she's a priest, so that was okay. Wonderful, scholarly, but also warm and sympathetic talk by a man who, it was maybe 20 minutes long. I liked it so much that I sent it to her, and she called me in a rage. Turns out she's on sabbatical, and she had given us a special number to use during that time, telling us that her replacement priest had her cell phone and would be taking messages addressed to her as a priest from that phone and with that phone. And I had sent this clip to that phone number. And she was irate and went into a lot of business about boundaries and how she's always had to worry with me about my boundaries with her and how could I do that to her. And she said, you know, it was an anonymous, he didn't know who I am. I have a different last name. She figured he didn't know who this was that was sending it to her. And there was no personal information that was there. I just said, this is a really good video if you want to look at it. But her anger was impressive, and I apologized, and I was horrified that in fact, I've removed her old number, her regular number from my phone altogether, so that doesn't happen again, and I'll put it in after her sabbatical is over. This was a terrible mess, and I thought, okay, here I am being invited to go right down the tubes, and I'm just not going down there. I just thought, it's good she told me how mad she was, and I just waited, and I thought this was unintentional. I have her best interests in mind. I do make mistakes. I made a big one. Well, she texted me about 2 hours later and said, I feel bad. I really yelled at you. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I hope you're okay. And I texted her back and I said, you were right to be mad. I blew it. I wasn't careful. And I was confused because you seemed to be really excited about having an exorcism. And you said at the time that you didn't know much about it. Whereas when she called me in her tirade, she said, Mom, I'm a priest. I know about these things. You don't have to educate me. Went into all this stuff. And I thought, well, what's going on here? And I'm not sure even now what's going on, but I sort of cathected Hobo the bird and I just stayed okay.
Perfect.
So in the Michael Rice follow-up hour, Susan Fluecki came on and suggested I do a worksheet with Michael on my sorrow over my grandson. And there was another piece of agenda coming up right then. So I said, no, thanks anyway. I'm going to do that on my own. So I went about doing one. And all I could come up with is that if I'm sorry about my grandson, it's because I love him and I think that's a good feeling to have when he's suffering. I don't feel as if I'm wrong. I'm not crawling around on the floor. I'm doing my work and I'm okay. I don't think it's wrong to feel strongly about my grandson. So I didn't get very far with the wake-up sheet except to keep picturing him well, wishing him well, saying prayers, doing my own private version of an exorcism. And that's where that stands. And I did wonder whether I'm in resistance of something by not doing a real wake-up sheet. It sort of just didn't get very far. I jumped right to the enlightened, what I thought was an enlightened goal, and left it at that. So that's the report.
Well, and that is, certainly okay, because that's what's happened. And if at some point you want to take a look at what that might look like to frame out a worksheet around your grandson, and you're feeling sad or sorry or whatever, we'd be happy to help you frame that out. But it's not like you have to do a worksheet on it. No, we never have to do worksheets.
Oh, I didn't think Susan F. was telling me I had to. She was just offering that as sort of something that I might like. But I might have done it, except that Michael had texted me earlier and saying this other woman is going to be on the show and wanted to talk about something else that I had talked about on the show. And she was on that show. So I just deferred to that and thought we'd go ahead with that.
Yeah,
So,
and that was a powerful show. So, as these shows unfold, they're always good and useful in ways that we can't always predict. So it's just, it's advantageous to learn to just deal with whatever life brings us. That's the whole message of these deep teachings. So, that certainly, that was a show about sharing deep, raw emotions about things that benefited not just the people sharing, but most of the people who were listening. And those are critical questions that a lot of people struggle with alone, because they don't feel like it's politically correct or acceptable to say those things out loud, or even, admit to having those kinds of questions.
that's true.
And it's easy to see why, because we're raised in this culture that has conditioned every last one of us to the idea that judging is important and necessary. And so we're always judging ourselves and judging others and passing judgment on others. And, there's a silliness to it, but it's just a part of the culture that we're raised in. I love how Guy Finley talks about it. He says, you're in a puddle crying of your own tears, crying on the bathroom floor, and then the phone rings and it's one of your friends who's having trouble, and all of a sudden you're the paragon of wisdom about what they need to do to solve the problems in their lives. And he says that's just who all of us are.
Yeah.
Every last one of us is just slogging through life, so to speak, and nobody has all the answers, and yet we're conditioned to think we should have the answers, or we should be giving the answers to others, even when we can't fight our way out of our own paper bag.
That is so true. All right. Well, thank you for indulging that. Go ahead. I'm eager to hear what you want to read. So Guy Finley is publishing a book.
Well, it's a new book that's out that isn't yet released for sale, but because, I was at this closing ceremonies, you might say, for his foundation in Oregon, we were given the opportunity to bring home a book or two. And so I did. And as I was reading it, I thought, this is just right here in the beginning. There's some nice reviews of core material and truths that cut across thousands of years and various teachers, etc. The back of the book has a listing of the sages, or the speakers of these wisdoms that he's accumulated in this book over the years. And so they literally start in the Old Testament, which they date here from 1,200 years before current era to about 100 years before current era, so 1,100 years of thought, teachings, whatever. And then the Upanishads, which are from somewhere between 800 to 200 BC, Lao Tzu from 600 to 490 BC, St. Paul from the fifth year of current era to 65. And then people like Khalil Gibran and T.S. Eliot and William James and Black Elk and wraps up with people from 1939, 1949, and 1954. So here is the first chapter, New Beginnings. He writes, reality is renewal itself. This means that as we learn to surrender ourselves to the source of life, that source of life that never stops starting over, so are we empowered to see that whatever seems a lost opportunity is really the same as a new one being revealed. Guy Finley. That's a quote from Guy Finley. And then the book reads, unlock the invisible source of all new beginnings. He writes, there is one thing most of us long for, and that is a new beginning. Doesn't it feel as though we carry so much baggage with us? The old pains, resentments, fears, insecurities, all of these based on past experiences that continue to live on in our minds and imaginations. Wouldn't it be wonderful to leave that all behind and just start over, released of that old burden? There would be no carried over pain or sense of limitation. We could step forward into life without the shackles of negative expectations. Our hearts would be open to new possibilities. This is what we say we want. But the catch is is that we've all said it 1,000 times, and yet has anything truly changed? Unfortunately, in most cases, nothing has changed at all. How many times have we entered a new career, moved to a new place, started a new relationship, and yet isn't it just a matter of time before we find ourselves back to the same old kind of life? The outer circumstances may be different, but we still feel the same sadness, the same anxiety, the same sense that something is missing. We still suffer from the same hair trigger emotions. The kinds of problems we face are basically the same. So the question arises, is real change possible? Can our lives ever be new? The answer is a resounding yes. And the key to experiencing this newness has been given to us by the great sages for millennia. They've revealed to us a mistake that we all make that guarantees we will not succeed at making genuine change. And that mistake is that we try to change our lives from the outside in. And the sages know that change must start from inside out, from within our own nature. It's all an inside story. And that's why it can't work to just change our weight or our job or our significant other. We ourselves must change to our very core. It's the self that looks out at the world, defines it, and reacts to it that actually creates the life we experience. So, to change events, to change the life we lead, we must start by changing ourselves. When we are new inside, everything on the outside will be new. Here's a taste of ancient and modern wisdom that stresses this very point. From Lao Tzu, he quotes, "If you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. If you want to eliminate the suffering in the world, then eliminate all that is dark and negative in yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation." Lao Tzu. Then he quotes Rumi as saying, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." And he quotes Jacob Boehme as saying, "We could come into a new reality of our being and perceive everything in a new relation if we can stand still from self-thinking and self-willing and stop the wheel of imagination and the senses." And he quotes the Dalai Lama or Leo Tolstoy, who says, "Human life changes us not from the alteration of external forms, but from the internal work of each man upon himself." That's Tolstoy. Then he quotes the Dalai Lama, "Our problems, both those we experience externally, such as wars, crime, and violence, and those we experience internally as emotional and psychological suffering, these will not be solved until we address this underlying neglect of our inner dimension. That is why the great movements of the last 100 years and more, whether democracy, liberalism, socialism, and communism, have all failed to deliver the universal benefits they were supposed to provide, despite many wonderful ideas. A revolution is called for, certainly, but not a political, an economic, or a technical revolution. We've had enough experience of these during the past century to know that a purely external approach will not suffice. What I propose is a spiritual revolution." The Dalai Lama. The book goes on, "But now the question is, how do we make this kind of change? Real change begins with a process of self-discovery, embarking on an inner journey. And it's the same journey for all of us. So with these thoughts in mind, let me help you see a great secret and how to share in the timeless wisdom it wants to share with you. There is no moment in passing time that isn't a flower. Just as surely as sunlight and rain and earth meet in some vine and produce a flower out of it, just as surely as that takes place on earth, that is never not taking place in heaven, and never not expressing itself on this earth. And if that's true, which it is, then that means we have within us something that can see every last one of these new flowers. And if we're present to its appearance, we are as new as the flower that has come. Which means in turn that anytime any part of us looks at some pending moment and standing there feels like what we are being asked to do is, quote, old stuff, close quotes, as if we've done that before. In that moment, we may be assured of the following: it isn't the moment that's old and boring. Rather, it's an old, unconscious nature, a lower level of self, if you will, that often feels that way about life. But what it can't see about itself, we can. What it's actually seeing in that moment is a reflection of itself. So if you're ever bored, what you're seeing is a reflection of yourself. He goes on, no such old and boring moments actually exist. It is a false sense of self that literally keeps revealing its own dreams about life and calling them reality itself. Its only power is to darken any moment of our life is there simply because we're unaware of its conclusions and our unconscious identification with them. In other words, I just know going into this holiday, I'm going to have to be around family and it's going to, it's going to be rough and there's going to be people and I just know it's going to be a bother. And so I create expectations. I create a filter through which I will perceive, interpret, and respond to life events. And I'm unaware that I'm doing that. It's so routine. It's so thoroughly conditioned into my thought pattern that I'm halfway through the book I've written about how this weekend is going to go before I wake up and realize, oh my gosh, it's not unfolding anything like I expected. So he writes, there's good news here, as told down through the ages. The more we awaken to this false view of life, the more new will our relationship be with life. It isn't a fanciful idea. You will be new. You will be the vine. Everything that comes out of the vine is new to the vine. Everything that falls off the vine is new to the vine. It doesn't care. Its contentment is not in what was, not in what will be, but in the fact of its life. What a tremendous gift it is to be a human being. To even glimpse something like the above idea sets the stage for an understanding that never grows old because it is ceaselessly being renewed, which means once this wisdom is awakened within you, so will you forever be renewed. So the idea is if we think that our thoughts about ourselves are who we really are, if we think that our predictions about life unfolding in this next few weeks or months or years is valid, then we actually create kind of a machine for perception that just keeps churning out the same old kinds of pictures, the same old kinds of disappointments. I paused there as soon as I said the word disappointments because I had a number of people ask me, 5 or 6 at least, ask me when I got back from my trip, was it all that you expected? And the question was like a slap in the face. It was like a splash of cold water in the face. And I realized the first few times I was asked that what I had done in preparation for this trip, probably more and better than any other time in the past that I've tried to do this, was I would just notice when expectations would come up and dismiss them. I wouldn't pour mind energy into it. I wouldn't spin fantasies about. I would notice when I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a dream that was clearly related to the idea I was going to be taking that trip. And yet I wouldn't spin thinking, wondering, hoping, wishing for this and that. I just went in saying, whatever it is going to be wonderful. I haven't been back in 45 years. I have no idea what I'll find. I have no idea if I'm going to be able to connect with friends from high school and friends from grad school. And so I actively worked to dismiss expectations if they arose, and I found I didn't have that many. It wasn't a struggle. And after the fact, looking back on it, clearly that was a major contributing factor to my being able to just relax and enjoy whatever happened on the trip, because it certainly didn't all go according to plan, and yet it was magnificent. however it unfolded, and the energy I could add to it when I would lose my place on the map and drive for a half an hour in a direction I hadn't intended to drive, and when I could just go with the flow and say, okay, well, here we are now, and now what's next to do? Do we keep going in this direction? Do we make a U-turn? Do we give up our plans to visit that location and instead add this thing over here? I just went with the flow because that's what I've been practicing doing for the past 20 plus years, and welcoming whatever life brings with the understanding that I can't figure it out with my conscious logical mind, but my history shows me that everything always works out. Certainly not the way I would have hoped or wanted, but it works out, and oftentimes in ways far better than I could have imagined. I remember I said this here before, but we have new people around who may not have heard it, but I had someone in my office 6, 8 years ago, and maybe it was 10, and she was saying something about how, she's out of time and all this and that she wants to never happen. And I found myself saying to her, I had this kind of a flash of, some would call it inspiration, but I just got this image of how I remember 25 or 30 years into the past. I'm not so old that I have forgotten that stuff. And I remember when my kids were 5 and 6 and 7 years old, 30 years ago. And I remember what I thought I needed to have in order for my life to unfold for me to be happy and for my life to unfold in a good way. And what I said to her is probably about 10 years ago, I said, I can honestly tell you that from that list of things that I thought I needed to have, essentially none of them happened. And yet here I am 25 or 30 years later, and I can tell you that I have more contentment and more satisfaction and almost none of the negative emotional states that I used to have on a regular basis. And yet I don't have anything that I thought I needed. So my life got better in ways I couldn't have imagined because certain things left that I would have clung dearly to for as though my life depended on it. And my life's better because those things have left. I didn't welcome them leaving. I didn't learn to appreciate it at all for a lot of years. I still don't celebrate it because of the cost. And yet it's undeniable, if I'm honest about it, that I couldn't have some of the most wonderful things about my life today if I had been able to hold on to some of those things that had dropped out of my life back along the line. So if you're in a situation where you're looking at your life and you're evaluating it and judging it and saying, this is bad, this is wrong, this sucks, this isn't working out, I can't recommend it too strongly that you just start canceling goals left and right, that you pick up the reality management worksheet and you let it guide you to developing this process of asking to be shown a different way to look at your life that's not going to come from what's been programmed into your logic, into your conscious logical mind. And if you will engage that practice, you'll probably be like most of the rest of us and discover that your capacity to be moved through insight, inspiration, or intuition grows and expands. If you practice canceling the reliance on what your thoughts can show you, canceling your need to be right, canceling your desire or need for anyone or anything to change, any aspect of your life to change, including yourself, and just get into that rhythm of asking to be shown and canceling the goals that you've been holding and watch what happens. And if it impacts your life positively, we'd be happy to hear about it here.
Hey, Tim.
Hello.
Um, when you say letting go of anybody, including ourselves, to change, like I get the concept of canceling that goal. What I don't like, where I have the stuck point is if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Right, but you stay focused on what you can change,
Right.
and you
And when
can't
you
make
say,
somebody else change something.
I know my stuck point is with, or when you say including ourselves,
Right.
what's the point if I'm
Well,
not,
if you
what's the
can make
point
a
in being,
change, if you can make a change, make it. But if you feel like you're bumping into something that this is just your true nature, it's just this is the only height you have, you were born with these genetics and now you're, 5'10" or whatever, and that's what you're born with, and you can't change it, then give up any desire for you to be different than you can make yourself be. If you have the capacity to change something for the better in the way you relate to the world, then go ahead and do that. But if
yeah,
if
well, I
I
don't care
say,
to change my height.
okay, but what is it you want to change about yourself?
I want to be able to be the conscious present, active presence of love.
Okay, then cancel the
Um,
goal for that to happen
right,
and actively work in doing the worksheets to remove everything that's less than that, that's lodged in your energy system, you might say, or that's been considered by you as
love and
a
love.
truth that can't change.
Oh,
Most of what we have within us that we say is horrible, that we can't change, is just a false belief.
see, I don't think that I say that I can't change something. That's that's where my stuck point is because I believe in miracles and that all things are possible and that through
Okay,
this
but then
work
there's no stuck
everything can
point.
change.
There's no stuck point if you just relax into it. If you truly believe that, there's no stuck point.
Okay, so what you're saying is to
If you
explore
can change
further
it,
if
change it. If you can stay open to it changing and stay loving, then do that. But if something less than love shows itself in your energy system, understand it as this signal that you're holding on to something, or you're focused on something you don't have any control over, or you're holding on to something that's blocking you from letting your true light shine.
right. So what you're saying is to look for those areas where I might not be conscious that I believe can't be changed. Because
Yes.
I'm not consciously aware of any beliefs that everything is changeable in me. I, do you?
So then, because you're not changing everything in your life for the better, those blockages must be unconscious.
Do
And as
you?
soon as they are removed, then your experience will be no blockages. And whatever that you, at that, from that perspective in life, however far up you are up the mountain, and what your view lets you know, then you'll be able to make assessments about what can change and what can't, and what you want to hold on to and what you can let go of. And some of the things that are in your life now that you complain about, you'll end up relabeling as a blessing, and they won't change, and you'll be fine with it. And other things that are in your life now that you are unhappy with, you'll find ways to either release them or to facilitate them changing, or you'll just magically witness that when you're no longer focused on having them change, they somehow change anyway. So if you have the capacity to change something for the better in your life, please do it. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, well, the forgiveness pattern says I don't want to ever change anything. That's not what the forgiveness pattern says. What it says is I give up my need for anyone or anything to change in order for me to be happy. I allow myself to be okay with whatever's unfolding. And as I quit pushing against the way it's unfolding, I get to see more clearly into the depth of my own, as the Way of Mastery calls it, the purity of my own unconscious. And that's where I
Okay.
might,
So
and
you're just
that's where I might find some of those hidden roadblocks.
okay. So you're just meaning like cancel the goal to change. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, because I've had physical healings. Through doing my work and breath work and stuff, and I mean, like, I don't
But
want to change things like the color of my eyes, but do I believe it's possible? Yeah, I believe it's possible. Mm.
so the idea is, if you were somehow interpreting the forgiveness pattern as saying, don't ever change, just keep everything exactly the way it is, that's not what it's intending.
No, that's not. So, do you have maybe mind shifter suggestion or something for how to access where those blockages might be that I'm like thinking that this isn't changeable in me? Because I'm really super unconscious of anything being changeable.
You're unconscious of
Mhm.
anything being unchangeable.
Yeah.
In other words, if we're trying to use regulatory speech, you might say something like, I'm only aware of believing that anything can change,
Okay.
rather than saying, I'm not aware of a belief that things cannot change. So now I'm talking in the negative or
Right.
the double negative.
Right. Right. So, do you have a suggestion for some targeted journaling? Uh,
Well, you might start with it's safe and healing for me, and I love it when I just always stay the same year after year.
Okay.
That sounded like a rather evil chuckle.
Yeah, I can have an evil chuckle when when especially at mind shifters that are like, make you kind of cringe when somebody says it.
Oh, so that was a cringe-worthy mind shifter for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. It's just I I, I want to be in. I've experienced bliss before, and I want to be there again, and I want to be there more frequently. I know that I'm not going to be there all the time.
Okay, so wanting to be there is the problem.
So just not accepting the way things are at this moment.
If you're not accepting the way things are in this moment, if you're wanting them to be different, then you're generating the upset that you're experiencing. And that's why the Way of Mastery has as its 5 keys to the kingdom desire, intention, allowance, surrender, and humility. Intention focused on the one energy that wants to express uniquely through you in each moment. Allowance, scanning for the earliest warning signs of tightness or tension or resistance and releasing it. surrender, asking to be taught by life in each moment. What's mine to learn here? How is this happening for me? How do I rewrite the mind energy that keeps wanting to tell me it's happening to me because it's bad, because it's wrong? And in that desire, intention, allowance, surrender, and humility, you have the keys to the kingdom. Notice there's nothing in the keys to the kingdom about changing yourself for the better. Isn't that interesting? You would think that if our assessment of ourselves was so accurate, that the great spiritual teachings would be teaching us how to fix ourselves instead of accepting ourselves as we are. Something must be different than what we've been thinking it is. Maybe we're not nearly as bad and wrong as our religions would tell us we are.
Yeah, I was fortunate not to have been raised with religion, so I didn't have to undo all of that. It's still so prevalent in our society. I guess there's still, of course, there's still some of that.
Yeah, it's out there in the zeitgeist, as they say. It's out there in the collective consciousness.
Right, right. And the not feeling worthy and all of that stuff that can come up when triggered.
Yes. So I hope
Okay.
that that's
I think
I hope that's a useful mind shifter for you. I applaud you in your willingness to keep exploring what you might do differently or just what you might allow differently. If there is a difference between those two, I would recommend, based on the teachings, that you move into allowance as often as possible, soon and often, as I like to say.
so cancel the need to experience that bliss again
Yes.
and just allow.
Yeah. Chasing after the bliss is one of the most tried and true ways to ensure it never returns.
Uh-huh. Right.
Well, so I wish you a safe and happy holiday weekend, and thank you for being here. Thank you all for comments and listening. And I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.